Speed has been cited as a factor in the one-car crash, but the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is checking for others. This picture of Walker next to the sports car was taken moments before the crash was taken.
12 years after Paul Walker died, his private garage was finally opened, and what people saw surprised everyone. Behind plain doors, there was more than just cars. It showed how much he loved them and how skilled he was. The garage had rare Japanese cars, American muscle, and fancy European cars, each with its own story. Some were being fixed, some untouched for years. Hidden notes, plans, and personal messages made it even more special and personal. Even his close friends were shocked by what they found. But what secrets had Paul Walker left behind in this hidden place? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. The discovery inside Paul Walker's garage that left everyone speechless. The death of Paul Walker in November 2013 shocked many people around the world. He died in a sudden and tragic car crash alongside his close friend and business partner, Roger Rodas. At the time, most people focused on his career as an actor and the impact he had through the Fast and Furious movies. He was known for speed, cars, and action on screen. But what many people did not know, and what slowly came to light later, was that his real-life connection to cars went far deeper than what was seen in movies. Sometime after his passing, a private garage connected to him was opened. From the outside, the building looked simple and plain. There were no signs, no labels, and nothing to suggest that anything important was hidden inside. It looked like just another storage unit among many others. But when the doors were finally opened, everything changed at that moment. Inside, there were more than 30 cars. Not just ordinary cars, but rare and powerful machines that many collectors would only dream of owning. The cars were arranged closely together, some covered, some left open, and many showing signs that they had been used, studied, and worked on. It was clear right away that this was not a place built to impress visitors. It was not clean like a showroom, and it was not designed for public display. Instead, it felt personal. It felt quiet. It felt like a place where someone came to think, to work, and to escape. Among the cars were several rare models, including multiple BMW 3 lightweight units. These cars were known for being limited in number, and owning even one would be considered special. But he had more than one, and each one appeared to have been carefully maintained. There was also a modified Toyota Supra, along with several versions of the Nissan Skyline GT-R 34. These were not just expensive cars, they were machines that required knowledge, patience, and deep interest to truly understand. As people walked through the garage, they began to notice something even more personal. Inside many of the cars were handwritten notes. These notes were not placed for show. They were hidden in glove boxes, tucked into compartments, and sometimes left in places only the owner would think to look. Some notes talked about how the cars performed, how they felt on the road, and what changes needed to be made. Others were more emotional, showing a quiet and private side of a man who did not expect anyone else to read them. One note, in particular, stood out. It was written to his daughter, Meadow Walker. The message was simple, but it carried deep meaning. It spoke about a future moment that never came. It was not written for the world, it was written for her. And when it was found, it left a strong silence in the room, as those present realized they were seeing something very personal. As more time was spent inside the garage, another truth became clear. Many of the cars were not just collected and stored. They were being worked on. Tools were placed neatly nearby. Some cars had parts removed. Others had notes attached, listing tasks that were completed and tasks that were still waiting. It showed that this was not a hobby done from a distance. This was hands-on work. This was someone who spent time with these machines, learning them, improving them, and enjoying every step of the process. This garage revealed a side of Paul Walker that many people never saw. It showed a man who was not just an actor playing a role, but someone who truly lived the life he portrayed. It showed patience, focus, and a deep love for something that brought him peace away from the noise of fame. And in that quiet space, surrounded by cars, tools, and handwritten notes, a fuller picture of who he really was began to take shape. But as the dust settled and the silence of that garage began to speak, one difficult question slowly started to rise. If these cars meant so much to him, and if he had poured so much of himself into them, then one question remains. Who did they really belong to after he was gone? And what would happen to everything he left behind? Let's delve deeper. Legal battles, unfinished plans, and a lasting legacy. As the garage continued to be examined, attention slowly shifted from what was inside to who actually owned it all. At first, it seemed simple. The cars belonged to Paul Walker. He had collected them, worked on them, and clearly cared for them. But as documents were reviewed and records were checked, the situation became more complicated. Many of the vehicles were not registered in his personal name. Instead, they were linked to a company known as Always Evolving. This company had been created as a motorsports and performance business, and it held ownership of several high-value assets, including the cars in the garage. While this setup may have made sense during his lifetime, it created confusion after his death. With no clear structure in place to handle the company, questions began to rise. Who owned the cars? Were they personal items, or were they business assets? Different people began to make different claims. Some said the cars belonged to the company. Others argued they were part of his personal estate. And because there was missing paperwork and unclear agreements, there were no easy answers. This confusion led to a long and difficult legal battle. The value of the dispute reached up to $18 million, and it involved multiple parties, including family members, business associates, and creditors. Each group had its own view of what was right. Each group believed it had a valid claim. And as the case continued, the cars that once brought joy became part of a stressful and emotional conflict. While the legal issues were unfolding, the garage continued to reveal more details. Several cars were found in unfinished condition. One example was the Datsun 240Z. This car was not complete. Parts had been removed. Sections were labeled. Plans were written down, showing what steps were next. It was clear that this was an active project, something he intended to finish. Nearby, other vehicles showed similar signs. Tools were still arranged neatly, as if work had only been paused, not stopped forever. Lists were written by hand, showing what had been done and what still needed attention. These small details made the loss feel even more real. It was not just about the past, it was about the future that was left unfinished. Then there was another discovery that added a deeper meaning to everything in the garage. Some cars had notes attached that pointed to charity plans. These notes were linked to Reach Out Worldwide, an organization he had founded to help people in need after disasters. The markings suggested that certain cars were meant to be sold in future events to raise money. This showed that the collection was not only about passion, it was also about purpose. He had planned to turn his love for cars into something that could help others. These were not ideas added later. They were plans he had already started before his passing. And seeing those plans left behind gave the cars a different kind of value, one that could not be measured in money. In time, some of the cars were sold at auction. In 2020, several vehicles were released to the public and brought in millions of dollars. However, not all of them were sold. Some were kept by the family. Others were handled privately. The legal process continued, slowly working through the details that had been left behind. In the end, what remained was not just a collection of cars, but a story of passion, of quiet work, of plans made and plans left unfinished. It showed a man who lived with purpose, who found peace in building and creating, and who wanted to use what he loved to make a difference. And even after everything was settled, the meaning of that garage stayed with those who had seen it, reminding them that there was always more to him than what the world saw on the surface. If this was the life he lived away from the spotlight, then what deeper meaning can be found in the legacy he quietly left behind? Let's find out. A life beyond the spotlight, passion, purpose, and a hidden legacy. Paul Walker was known around the world as a movie star who loved fast cars. Many people saw him as the calm and confident driver he played on screen, especially in the Fast and Furious films. However, a closer look shows that this image was only part of who he really was. His interest in cars was not just for acting or fame, it was something personal and meaningful to him. He spent time learning how cars worked, how to build them, and how to improve them. This shows that his love for cars was real and not just for show. One clear example of this deep interest was his strong focus on Japanese performance cars, especially the Nissan Skyline GT-R R34. He owned several of these cars and worked on them to make them better. These cars are rare and not easy to bring into the United States because of strict rules. Even so, some of the vehicles he had were brought in using special permissions that only allow limited use. Because of this, a few of the cars were not fully legal for normal road driving. Some were not registered, and others were still being adjusted to meet legal standards. This shows that he was willing to take risks just to keep the cars in their original and best form. For him, the quality and design of the car mattered more than convenience or rules. Another important discovery was that some of his cars were meant for charity work. These plans were connected to Reach Out Worldwide, a group he started to help people during natural disasters. Notes found with certain cars showed that they were planned to be sold in the future to raise money for this cause. These plans were made by him before his death, which means they were not added later by others. This shows that he wanted to use his success and his collection to help people in need. He did not do this for attention, but because he believed it was the right thing to do. After his death, some of the cars were sold as part of managing his estate. In 2020, 21 vehicles were auctioned, bringing in more than $2.3 million. Not all the cars were sold, though. Some stayed with his family, while others were handled in private sales. This careful sharing of the collection shows that there was a balance between handling financial matters and respecting personal value. The cars were not just items to sell, but meaningful pieces connected to his life. The process of going through the collection was not easy for those close to him. For Meadow Walker and others, it was an emotional experience. Each car seemed to tell a story about who he was. Some cars were unfinished, showing plans he never got to complete. Tools, notes, and parts were left as they were, making it feel like he had just stepped away. This made the space feel very personal and heavy with emotion. It was not just about sorting property, but about facing memories and loss. In the end, what stands out most is the kind of person he was. Paul Walker was not just a celebrity who liked cars. He was someone who truly understood and cared about them. He worked on them, learned from them, and enjoyed the process. At the same time, he also cared about helping others. Through Reach Out Worldwide, he showed that he wanted to make a difference in people's lives. His life reflects a mix of passion, skill, and kindness. He kept much of his work private, choosing not to show everything to the public. This makes his story even more meaningful, as it shows honesty and humility. His legacy is not only about movies or cars, but also about how he lived and what he valued. What exactly happened on that fateful day? How did a seemingly ordinary drive turn into a tragic accident that shocked the world and changed so many lives forever? Stay tuned for more. The tragic accident of Paul Walker. On a quiet afternoon in Valencia, California, something shocking and terrible happened. Paul Walker, a well-known actor, and his close friend Roger Rodas were out for a drive. They were not just driving any car. They were in a bright red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT, a very fast and powerful sports car. Roger Rodas, who had experience as a professional race car driver, was behind the wheel. Paul Walker was sitting in the passenger seat, enjoying the ride. People nearby had no idea that this drive would end in a sudden tragedy. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, the car was moving much too fast. The speed limit on that street was only 45 miles per hour, but the car was going over 100 miles per hour. Suddenly, for reasons that are still not completely clear, Rodas lost control of the car. The vehicle spun out of control. First, it hit the sidewalk on the right side of the street. Then, the driver's side collided with a tree and a street light pole. The crash was so strong that the car spun again. And this time, the passenger side struck another tree. The car finally came to a stop, but the impact caused it to burst into flames. People nearby could hear the crash from a long distance away, and it was terrifying for those at the nearby charity event. Firefighters and police were called quickly, but sadly, both men did not survive. Paul Walker had suffered many broken bones, including injuries to his jaw, collarbone, and arm, and had severe burns all over his body. Some soot in his airway suggested that he was alive for a short time after the crash. Roger Rodas had serious injuries to his head, neck, and chest, and he died almost immediately. Investigators confirmed that neither man had been drinking alcohol or using substance at the time. The car itself played a role in the tragedy. Its low-profile racing tires made it hard to control, especially at high speeds. There were also small bumps in the road that could make a fast car skid if it hit them in the wrong way. Investigators concluded that mechanical problems did not cause the crash, and both men had been wearing seatbelts, with airbags deploying correctly. Despite all precautions, the combination of extreme speed, tire conditions, and road factors made the accident unavoidable once control was lost. If speed and circumstance led to tragedy, how did the aftermath unfold, and what challenges arose in the days and years following that fateful crash? Let's learn more. Paul Walker's death, aftermath, and legacy. After the accident, the world was shocked and very sad. Paul Walker was only 40 years old, and millions of people loved him. News of his death spread very quickly, and people everywhere were upset. His family, friends, and co-stars came together to mourn him and remember the life he had lived. A private funeral was held in December, and many people attended. His colleagues from the Fast and Furious movies were there too. It was a time of grief, sadness, and reflection. People shared memories of a man who had made a big impact on their lives. At the time of his death, Paul was working on Furious 7, the next movie in the Fast and Furious series. Production of the film stopped for some time after the accident. To finish the remaining scenes, his younger brothers, Caleb and Cody, stepped in to help. They acted as stand-ins for Paul. Computer effects were also used to recreate his face for the film. The movie was eventually completed, and the final version included a touching goodbye to both Paul and his character, Brian O'Connor. Fans and co-workers saw this as a special tribute to his life and the work he had done. Paul was also known for his love of cars. He was a passionate car enthusiast and had a deep understanding of vehicles. He collected cars and often shared his love for speed and machines with others. Beyond his love for cars, Paul was a kind and generous man. He worked with his charity, Reach Out Worldwide, to help people in need, especially those affected by disasters. His death was a strong reminder to everyone that fast cars and high speeds can be very dangerous, even for skilled drivers like him. After the crash, legal issues came up. Some people stole parts of the wrecked car and were later sent to prison. Paul's daughter also filed a lawsuit against the car manufacturer, saying that problems with the design of the car contributed to the accident. The case was settled a few years later, but the details were kept private. Even though Paul died young, his influence and legacy continue. What do you think could have been found inside Paul Walker's garage that left everyone speechless? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for following the shocking and heartbreaking story of Paul Walker, the beloved actor whose life was tragically cut short in a fiery car accident. If this story left an impression, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to uncover more incredible real-life stories that will surprise and move you. See you there.